There we go. Now here we're ready to go. Welcome, everybody. I am delighted to be here streaming on Facebook. And if you're watching on YouTube, this is where we started with my friends who are the college autism experts and the authors of the newly revised, and I'm not very good at this. Here we go. Neurodiversity in College, a parent's guide. Whoops. For autistic students. So excited. This is a long time of anticipation for this book to come out and be updated by these wonderful people. So let's get started. And for those who are watching on Facebook, please put your questions in the chat and I will try to get to all of them in the time that we have today. But in the meantime, let's start with some introductions and backgrounds. So, I'm an alphabetical order kind of gal. So Jane, go ahead.
It's wonderful to have a very last name of Brown because growing up, I was Thierfeld, so I was always at the end. So thank you, Elizabeth. It's such a treat. Thank you so much for inviting us. It's such a pleasure to be here with you, of course, and with everyone who's listening. I'm Jane Thierfeld Brown, and I am I guess, founder and now co-director of College Autism Spectrum. And I've been in disability services for over 40 years at several different universities, most recently at the University of Connecticut School of Law. And I have worked with students with disabilities and in particular students with autism for decades now. And I'm happy to see that we're in such good company of other people talking about this topic now. I'm married and have 3 children, 2 of whom are neurodivergent, and one is what we now term severe profound autism. One has severe profound autism, and we are a Fragile X family. So thank you for having us. And I'm going alphabetically. Amy, I guess you're next.
Hey, hey, everybody. I'm Amy Rutherford. I hate saying this. I don't know. It's weird, Jane, co-director of College Autism Spectrum. So I've been working alongside Jane and Lori for some years now, and recently took the leap out of higher ed and am doing some of the College Autism Spectrum work kind of full time now. But I worked at the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga for about 17, 18 years, co-founder and led the Mosaic program there, which is a degree-seeking program for autistic students as they transition into and out of college. And I am a mom of 2 young kiddos, a family full of neurospiciness, and excited to be here.
Lori.
Good afternoon. I'm Lori Wolf. My last name is W, so I always come last. Along with Jane, we founded College Autism Spectrum too many years ago to remember when. I am by training a clinical neuropsychologist, one of those people who charged you thousands and thousands of dollars to drop diagnostic bombs in your lap and start you on the journeys that that you're all on. I'm also a mom of 2 neurodivergent kids, one of the spectrum flavor and the other of the ADHD flavor. So I'm just going to move this because I see that I have there we go.
We're calling it a lightsaber, Lori.
A lightsaber, yes, I have a lightsaber. So let me know if it comes back, and I'll just move my monitor again. Excuse me. So I am also worked in higher education. I recently retired after 27 years as the Director of Disability and Access Services at Boston University, where I was also the ADA 504 compliance officer, and I had some faculty appointments. Since my retirement, I am working in this space. I'm also teaching in the Landmark College online professional certificate program, which is a ton of fun. And we actually have parents who are taking that certificate program because they're interested in learning strategies, particularly executive function strategies for managing their own families and youngsters. So it's not just for professionals. I don't get paid to promote the program, but it's a fantastic curriculum, and I'm having a blast in that. Bringing this book into the second edition really was something that we have wanted to do for a long time. And there were some copyright issues and, some publisher issues, and
Publishing is fun.
we weren't able to do it. The minute we were able to do it, the minute that the lawyers stopped haggling and we actually got control of our book, we sat down and we looked at what needs to be updated in the, what, 12 years, 10 years since we wrote the first one. The field has changed a lot. And, that's been a wonderful thing. When we wrote these books, and this is the second of two that we wrote, um, people in higher education didn't really understand autism.
Mhm.
And so we were driven to educate them and to let them know how to work with students that were coming down the pike. Then we realized that parents also didn't understand how to prepare their autistic students for higher education because it really hadn't been more than an aspiration for lots of families. So it kind of grew in parallel. As the numbers of autistic kids kept growing, the number of autistic kids getting to college kept growing, and families were able to look at this really as more than an aspiration, but a real goal for their youngster in ways that they hadn't before. And we decided our collective knowledge as disability providers, as parents of, neurodivergent kids, we were very well positioned to sort of give some insider tips and tricks, how to work with disability and access services, what does the admissions process really look like, to sort of pull the curtain back and let families know. In the years since we wrote it, the landscape of families has changed. We have a lot of first generation students whose parents may not have gone to college and may not know what a dean or a bursar, what that is. So we expanded those sections. We also, have the not new, but gaining in popularity term neurodivergent. And we wanted to incorporate that because that's the term that college students use to describe themselves. Whether their neurodivergence is ADHD or autism or a learning disability, that's a term that you see on campuses, not so much in high schools. And that is going to change, but that's why we included that in the title of the book, really to be inclusive. The language that we used was inclusive, and I think that we achieved the goals that we wanted to, and diversity is becoming a loaded term right now. We didn't want to lose that. I'm still trying to get rid of this lightsaber. There we go. We didn't want to lose the concept of diversity and divergence and neurodivergence, which is an interesting term. And if we have some time and people have questions about what that is, we can certainly tackle that.
Yes. I was going to say, so for folks who are watching us live, if you've got questions, I've got the chat open. Please drop your questions in here. We have preloaded questions as usual, but these folks would love to answer yours. So go ahead, and I'm keeping an eye on the chat. I'm sorry, Lori, go ahead.
Nope, nope, that's okay. And we have those preloaded questions. Do you want me to just move through them? Do you want
Yeah,
to?
so let's
I
talk
want-
next about how we prepare students for college transition.
Well, the first thing is to take a deep breath and check in with
Always good
yourself.
advice.
No matter how old your kiddo is, if they're young, great. It's not too young to start. Well, maybe preschool is a little too young to start. Although, as an academic family, we took our kids to college campuses. We, just so that they would, drink the Kool-Aid and kind of, see what campuses were like. But realistically, when you have a middle schooler, when you have a young high schooler, to sort of begin with giving your students an opportunity to advocate for themselves by understanding what's the nature of their condition. Has it been described for them? Do they understand why they might get extra time on exams? Do they know anything? And obviously, in language appropriate to their age, your evaluators, your special ed people should be able to help with that in, letting kids know that there's no mystery about this, and there's certainly no shame about this. That when we hide information from kids who are neurodivergent, their default is to believe that they're stupid, that they're not
Mm.
capable, that they're never going to amount to anything. And that's just sort of, a very sad state of affairs. So we're very big proponents of start to talk to your kids. about what's going on in language that they understand, and then scale that language up as they get older. By the time they're ready for college, by the time they're in high school, they should have read the documentation reports. They should understand the diagnoses, the medication, the treatments. We're not expecting them to be neuropsychologists, but they should be able to understand it and, more importantly, talk about it. So that's kind of the big preparation, is to give your kids the knowledge that they'll need to advocate in when they get to college. We also want you to start making them responsible for handling their stuff, making their appointments, filling their medications, commuting, understanding, having a volunteer position. So we want them in the safety of our homes, whether that's in middle school, junior high, high school, to start to have chores and responsibilities and be responsible for managing their own time and materials, because increasingly they'll be asked to do that more and more. And really the success in college comes down to self-regulation, executive function, and the ability to negotiate with other people. So getting
Mm.
started with that at whatever level they are is really important for that transitional piece.
And Jane, so for those of you who follow the work that I do, I'm an occasional co-host of the College Parents Central podcast. And when we're done with this, I'll drop the link to the ladies' interview for that. But I remember in that interview, you said, preparation for college kind of starts in like nursery school when you tuck your chair in, right? When you get up from the table.
Right. I think that's, fortunately, I've had the opportunity to watch the progression of special ed especially with my son, from preschool to adulthood, and where we live in Connecticut, and it's not where I am right now. We're away on vacation at the moment,
Woohoo!
not in my own home, um, but I was fortunate enough to be able to observe what the preschool special ed teachers did, something Amy's going through right now, and with her little ones. And as I would observe, we were fortunate in that we had places where you could watch what was going on in the classroom and the kids could not see you. And over, I was struck by how everything that the teachers and clinicians were doing in those very young grades were often undone in some of the older grades, especially by the time you
Interesting.
got to middle school.
That is interesting.
In preschool, it's all about encouragement and independence. Oh, you
Mhm.
can do it. You can get that shoe on. Let's try again. Okay, yep, pull that tongue up. You can do it. Where by the time you're in middle school, the numbers and ratios change so much that you might have one aide or paraprofessional to who knows how many kids, and they might need to just slip everybody's shoes on because it takes too much time to get six
Right.
individuals to try and help them get their shoes on. But then what are our students losing in independence? And in preschool, it might be pushing your chair in, washing your hands, putting your shoes on. But that kind of independence is what turns into, don't forget your homework, remember to have your parents sign this permission form, all those things. It's all a developmental process. And I think, especially in special education, our kids are forced to undo some of the things that they learn because we as parents are pushing so much academics.
Mm.
Don't worry about those things. We just want them to get the grades. We just want them to have more time in academics, not more time pulled out of the classroom. And sometimes what we see in college is the students may be excellent academically, but they're missing some of those life skills that we need them to have more experience with. And it depends, every student is so different. It really depends on what their journey's been like.
So, one of the questions I find people asking all the time is how do we know? And we're speaking both to parents, I think, here and professionals. How do they know when a student is really ready for college? How can they assess? And I think we decided Lori was going to tackle this one, but ladies, please chime in, because it's always a leap of faith, right? Even for
Mhm.
neurotypical
Oh,
teenagers, like.
Yeah,
They're
yeah,
they're they're across the spectrum of readiness and maturity as well. But
absolutely.
Lori,
And it's not what you think. It's not that
Mm.
they got a great SAT score and that they've taken, all of the college prep classes and done well and they've had 14 AP classes, by 11th grade. That's not how you assess readiness. That may be part of assessing academic readiness, but that's really not the hallmark. We look at it as a resilient student who can stand on their own 2 feet, who can take care of themselves, who can advocate for themselves, who has had perhaps a successful opportunity living away, camp, a summer teen trip, spending a summer at grandma's, somewhere where they have not been in their childhood bedroom with their familiar uh, items. So someone who's ready to live away, if that's the choices that a family is making. Sometimes that's not a viable choice, and people are looking towards colleges that let a student live at home. That's a different kind of readiness. But once the student gets to college, they are regarded as an adult, whether they're a 16-year-old taking extension courses or a 24-year-old going to graduate school, they are considered an adult by the university. So the readiness has to do with, is your youngster able to take on those challenges? Are they able to manage their own affairs without mom and dad in the background, without an aide? Can they navigate mass transit? Can they live with a roommate? Can they talk to a professor? So those are really the things that we're looking at. Is that someone who is resilient, who's motivated, who's able to advocate for themselves. And don't panic because those are skills. Those are not attributes that someone is born with and that
Mm.
automatically bloom. That's where we started out. These are things that we can teach our youngsters from the time they're very small, so that when they're 16 or 17, we can look at them and say, did we learn these lessons? And do we trust that this is someone that I can send away? And, if not, let's step back and make a different plan, which I think we'll get into a little bit later. There are lots of ways to go to college, and they're not all, 4-year, go to state university or fancy sleepaway college.
So I think that's a nice segue. We have our first question from folks who are watching, because as you said, there's like academic readiness, and what's good is students who are, achieve a certain level can feel really confident. So this parent says, what if our child feels that they don't want to engage with disability services? Perhaps because their alternative high school did a great job with their 504 and the child feels confident. How would you suggest we encourage her to consider this? And to this parent, I will also drop in on my website. I have 2 posts about this. One is talking points for parents and professionals to use to encourage students to register, and another one speaks directly to what the research shows us students' concerns often are about what happens when they disclose. But I'm going to let you hear from these experts.
Well,
Excuse
I'll
me.
start.
Yeah,
And
Why
go for
don't
it,
you start,
Jane.
Jade, and then I can give you
okay,
my
and
favorite
Amy,
answer.
if you want to chime in too. I think there's a couple ways, and I
Mhm.
certainly had one of my um, adult children that was very much against disclosing to disability services. I did all the good academic arguments of why you need to and what helped in high school. And now let's think about what's going to be like in college. And the answer was no, no, no. So, and again, this is a very individual thing by family, and it's also depending on your particular student. What I did, knowing that this individual needed these accommodations very badly, or just needed them, let's say. I said, okay, here's the deal. Since we are the ones paying, we will write the check to your chosen university as soon as you show me a list by email of all the appointments you've made for the semester with disability services. And the response was, you're not really going to do that. And I was like, yeah, I really am. This is a lot of money. This is really important. And what I said is, if it turns out you don't need these things after first semester, or if you only need it for certain classes, then that can be a discussion with you and disability services, because I knew to try and take myself out.
Mhm.
After the first semester, they realized what they needed. and then really advocated for those particular classes
Mm-hmm.
because the foreign language, math, those kinds of things. But had I not pushed it and believed
Mm-hmm.
me, it was not a happy household for a while. And I know that you may have difficulty with that. You're ruining my life. Yeah, I get it. But you're making mine pretty difficult at the moment too. That's so yeah, I think sometimes we do have to say, um, it's a lot, it's many thousands of dollars for you to go to community college or a state university or wherever you're going. And we can't do that without accommodations at first
Mm-hmm.
because there's no do-overs. You can't say, oh, I did need accommodations and I didn't get them, so I have to take that exam again. That doesn't happen. Go ahead,
No.
Amy.
And oh, before we
Oh, I'm
go
sorry.
on though, just for because I see lots of new people joining us, I'm no Vanna White, but this is we are having a Q&A with the authors of Neurodiversity in College, A Parent's Guide for Autistic Students. And if you missed the introductions, not these women are experts, not just because they've been in the field and they present all over the place, but also because they are parents. And so I think it really informs the work that you do. Amy and Lori, did you want to jump on anything else to help that parent out?
Yeah, no, I would love to chime in. I was that student. I was that student who avoided disability services as I transitioned in, maybe for the exact opposite reason. I think I came in with a pretty negative experience from my high
Mm,
school supports. And
hmm
so there was this negative stigma that was attached to it. And I didn't want to be known as someone that was connected to DS services. And I had no idea how different it looked in the college space, right? On a college campus. And so I think it was rough for me and my mom in the beginning, but some similar tactics. My parents kind of said that proactive, so like reaching out proactively was essential for them to support the idea of me moving away and moving 2.5 hours from home.
mm,
And so I bought into it for that reason. But I'll
hmm
say that something happened, and I have to give some credit to my former executive director, and she was in a leadership role in the disability office at that time, and it was a vibe thing. I felt connected to
Oh,
the
wow.
staff when I
Yeah.
visited. Maybe it was a forceful visit, and I'll admit that, but I felt connected, and I felt like, okay, this could be a point person that I can come to if I were to get lost. And that's not always the case, but I think that at the time there was really good people doing really good work. And
hmm
I didn't engage right away. Regardless of the, push that my parents gave, that they were encouraging me to reach out, and I knew that support was there. It took me coming to kind of a difficult place in my first semester to then reach out to that hub that was identified for me as a resource. And so I would say be patient too. Yes, like proactive is essential. We can't be retroactive active with accommodations. But getting registered is step one, and letting the student kind of understand that is the hub and that is the point person to go to when things get challenging. And it goes back to the first response that everyone was kind of chatting about, is fostering that independence. Don't solve the problems for them, make them navigate, because they're going to need resources to navigate some of the barriers that students experience, all students experience, but especially
Right.
neurodivergent students like myself experience that, first test we get back that maybe wasn't the best score. I think my first math test, I'm really good at math, but it was really bad. And I went to the hub of disability services to kind of get support at that point. So being patient with the process,
Mm.
so important.
Well, and I think too, one of the questions I had teed up is, what are things that maybe high school professionals, and I don't mean just people working in high schools, the psychologists, neuropsychologists who do this testing, the speech and language therapists, all the folks that may be working with families, either don't know about the changes of the college environment or don't think to tell families that, and certainly they're discussed in this book. So folks, read the book. But just for the purposes of this conversation, are there really sort of standout things? Like we're talking about the fact that um, accommodations are not what we call retroactive, right? So if a student doesn't register with us, and research shows there's a number of them every year, takes their first exam, doesn't do well, comes to our office and says, hey, I should have had my accommodations. I would like to take that test over. From talking to you folks, I learned that there are high schools that allow students to do that, that allow them to take these tests over and over until they get a grade they like. And that is not the kind of thing that is happening at the college level. So obviously, there's no promise that students would still register with us if they knew that, but perhaps. So, ladies, I mean, specifically to the autism community, are there things that you think families should know about that the professionals don't know or won't think to tell them?
Let me start that one, and you know, I think that um, having been an evaluator and having, you know, written those reports with a laundry list of 1,000 different accommodations, which were
Mhm.
well thought out and grounded in the test scores and the pattern, and you know, it did not occur to me until I was working in the field that most of those, while appropriate perhaps for a younger student, we're not going to transfer to higher education. And that, you know, so I think that evaluators and special educators really need to think about the laundry list of accommodations that we fight, you know, with our SPED teams to get those in the IEP. And then when the student transitions to college, are they appropriate? Are they appropriate for higher education and in the service of, you know, teaching a student to manage themselves so that they are eventually employable, which is a concept that we, the three of us, have started to talk about a lot. Not to scare parents and say, you know, you need to start job training and, you know, in 10th grade, but,
Sure.
you know, everything is in the service of an independent, employable adult. And so an 11th grader who is having, you know, test questions read to them because they might miss the nuance of a question.
Mm,
You know, we want to rethink things like that. We want to rethink things like study guides, unlimited time for exams, extensions on every out of class assignment, homework only done at home, double copies of books. We want to look at those and think about, are those holdovers from when a student was younger? Or can we pare some of those away? So I do think that professionals and special ed departments need to be educated as to what is reasonable at college. What do we consider reasonable? And why do we make the decisions that we make about accommodations that we might not agree to provide?
mhm.
I absolutely agree with what Lori said. I've been fortunate enough the past 3 years to be a transition consultant in high school in Connecticut, in Farmington High School. And it was such an amazing educational experience for me, not only because I worked with wonderful special educators, but it really showed me a lot of what the issues are with students coming to college. Special educators are so amazingly good at teaching students what they need to know. And yet, if parents fight back, like we all have done, I certainly did, um, once the parents fight back, the administration backs down and kind of says, you know, we have too many people fighting, just, you know, give them what they want. And because of that, often our students get accommodations that they just shouldn't be getting. Not only because they don't need them, but because it's really a disservice to what they are going to face later on. And that doesn't mean you don't want your students to do well, but you want them to do well and be prepared. And
Mhm.
talking consistently to special educators in K-12, they say all the time the most difficult part of the job is spending hours and hours and hours planning and developing good strategies for students, only to have the administration say,
Wow.
no, we're just going to accommodate that because we don't. And they are trying to make sure that our students get what they need in order to not just be good at high school. I think for 5 years
Yeah.
I did a project with the state of Pennsylvania. And one of the most important things I heard that whole time was the district supervisor saying to me, what we've realized is we are really good at making kids good at high school, and we don't think about one day after graduation. And that has stayed with me because I think that's just it. You know, are we thinking about what's next? So go ahead,
Mm,
Amy, you were going to say something and
I mean, you kind of summed it up. A few things came to my mind as you were saying. It's transitional goals that actually our transitional goals and not just kind of copy and paste and drop down. And so like sometimes I think that for the parents that I've worked with, especially in the last few years, I hear this kind of common theme of I've been fighting so hard I don't even know what I'm fighting for anymore, but I know I
Oh,
must keep
wow.
fighting. And
Yeah.
so for that, that just tells me that like we need to do a better job at educating all parties on like what that end goal really is. It's not just to walk across the stage at high school, but it's not only to walk across the next stage in college, but it's to be in like have skills and have employability, right? We want folks to be employable. That's why we go to college. Yeah, social, yes, growth, all the things, but we really want that end goal to be employment or employability. And so
And
like
just to
Oh,
put
closing that gap. No, go
sorry.
ahead.
I absolutely agree, and I
I'm
just want to put a
excited.
pin in that, is that there are also some kids who, paring away the supports isn't feasible. They
Yeah.
really
Mhm.
need the supports. And so for those families, we want to say, well, then be realistic about your post-secondary choices, your students'
Mhm.
post-secondary choices. Maybe four-year live-away school is just not in the wheelhouse, but we're so fortunate to have lots of different ways that students can participate in something post-secondary that, be realistic. And if your student needs that aid, great, fine. But that aid's not going to college.
Right.
So that's a nice segue, I think. This English major always tries to make a connection between that and the next question when we're talking about independence. So we have a question. The parent says, I know this is controversial, but are there circumstances where you advise a student or a parents to advise their student to waive FERPA for parents, caregivers, and if so, this is very interesting. Which specific offices? So, for those who are not familiar with FERPA, it is the Family Educational Rights Privacy Act. And so, if your kids are not yet 18, you probably have not heard of this. But what happens is once your kids turn 18, they are in charge of their educational records. So, if they're still in high school, they get to sign their IEP or their 504. And when they go to college, the one thing the college will send you without your student's permission is the bill. Um, that one they're fine with. But the rest of the communications go directly to your students. So with that, what are your thoughts on that? Because we're talking about students' independence. Jane's talked about conditions under which she allowed her, she decided she would pay for college. So thoughts?
I have lots of thoughts on,
I bet you do.
but I know and there's three of us. I'm sure we all have, so I'll be very brief. Um, and especially to this parent who asked the question, one of the most important things you can do is find out what a FERPA waiver means at the college that
That's
your
true.
student chooses.
Mm.
Because it means very different things. Many colleges will only, if you waive your FERPA rights, then they will contact someone in a medical emergency. That's it. There's other places that do feel differently, but the federal laws are wildly different than the way most colleges interpret them. So find out what your student is getting by waiving those rights. And then usually with the financial and registration materials is where you'll get that FERPA signature. And I think it has to be a discussion because often students sign that not knowing what it is. So it does not give you permission to choose their classes. It does
Mhm.
not give you
Mhm.
permission to talk to their professors. That is not part of FERPA. So
Right.
I think a lot of parents think, well, if my student signs a FERPA waiver, I can talk to whoever I want, just like I did in high school. And that's not the case at all.
And I have just dropped in the chat, and if you're watching this on YouTube later, it will be in the summary and in the description here, a link to a post on my blog when I wrote my own book about college transition and interviewed these women. I also asked my colleagues who run disability services offices, what does a FERPA waiver mean to them or not? And so there's a blog post with them talking about the things that they don't even have to know let alone tell you with a waiver. So it's, you know, a lot of folks in our field say a FERPA waiver is not a FERPA obligation, meaning that if it's not DS's job to know how your student is doing in their biology class, it is not their job to call the professor and see how the student is doing. So that's part of the reality. But and with that, I'll step out.
So I only address the what it means. Amy and Lori, if you want to address independence wise, because I think that's what the parent was
Yeah, I
asking.
think so
Yeah,
too.
you know,
Yeah.
when parents say this, it's usually because they're worried on many levels that their student isn't going to take care of their stuff. They're not going to go to appointments. They're not going to achieve use their accommodations. They're not going to share their grades. They're not going to, let the parents know what's going on. And they believe mistakenly that the FERPA waiver will give them automatic entree into calling residence life and finding out what's happening, calling the dean. And as Jane pointed out, that is usually not the case. Some parents have taken that to extremes of saying, well, maybe I'll get guardianship of my students so that I can participate in all of their educational decisions, to which we say, what message does that send your emerging adult? If you are intruding legally into what's going on in college, if you have reason to suspect that your student needs that level of surveillance, again, step back and rethink the environment that you're putting them into. What are your expectations? Are they truly ready for that? Because it really sends a message to a student that the parent doesn't trust them to be able to do the right thing. And that's exactly the opposite of what the message that we want to send, which is that you are an independent, emerging adult, and we're going to teach you how to take care of yourself without mom and dad in the background, so that the parents will believe that that's a kind of a safety net. And it's, as Jane said, really a mistaken belief, because it's not what parents think it is. There was a lot of talk regarding mental health in students, and are colleges obligated to tell parents when their students go to mental health services on campus, and that somehow the FERPA waiver was a magical thing that would obligate health services at a college to call a parent when they sought therapy? And that is not the case. And so as Jane said, really, think about what level of surveillance are you asking for, why, and does it mean what you think it means?
Just
And
to
yeah.
interject on the guardianship issue, because this
Oh
comes up
yeah.
so
All the
much
time.
now.
Yeah.
There are many colleges that are looking into whether, if you as a student need a guardian, if you are otherwise qualified to be a college student. So be very careful with anything like that, because now have guardianship over my son who did not go to college, but he is intellectually disabled, severely autistic, and nonverbal. That's different. He needs a guardian. But if you're talking about someone who is college capable, you really want to think if guardianship is the way to go. I'm sorry, Amy and Elizabeth, you're both going to say something and I
I was
interrupted.
just going to add something real quick, and maybe it's kind of broadening or jumping away from the whole concept of FERPA, but and this looked very differently for me and my mom as I transitioned, but I would say that I encourage folks to have those expectations conversations. Like, what are your expectations with this upcoming transition? And I talk to families all the time that are telling us what they want. Parents are telling us what they want, and the expectations don't align, or there's like
Interesting.
expectations that the student feels that exist that aren't really there on behalf of the parent. And so what
Oh.
a great way to kind of think about just proactively having conversations about your expectations and continuing those conversations as things change once your student kind of transitions. And that gives you what a lot of people are looking for when they're pursuing like signing the FERPA waiver and doing all of those steps. It's really that conversation. And again, it's difficult. I don't know as if I would have been in a place as a freshman in college to have expectations outlined for me, but maybe I would have been. And so just thinking about maybe taking that approach and like working as a family unit, if that's possible.
And we have a follow-up question about whether FERPA is just for a medical emergency situation. My experience in talking to colleagues is different colleges have different FERPA waivers. So for some, it's a blanket for anything that happens at campus. Different ones, there's one for disability services, there's one for academic advising. So to that parent, all I can do is suggest that your student, would be my preference, contact I don't know, who do you even contact to ask about a FERPA waiver? That's a great question.
Start with admissions. They
Okay.
should
Okay,
know
great.
who needs a FERPA
Yeah.
waiver and what it means. What the majority of colleges will say is even with a FERPA waiver,
Yeah.
the only way they will talk to a parent is with
Mhm.
their student present.
Okay.
That is the
Yep.
overwhelming, because there have been too many court cases where a professional at a university or at a college or community college have talked to a family member without the student knowing. And then, of course, that person may not know that there's other issues in the family, and that so the majority of people, even with a FERPA waiver, will only talk with your student present.
Okay. And to
With,
that parent who,
with regard to medical, the school or college may not know that a medical situation is going on. So another thing that families need to be prepared, and this happened to us, is that if your student is admitted to a hospital, the hospital may not call you. The school may not know. If the school knows, even with a FERPA waiver, they may not release information. So, it all goes back to, find out what is that individual school's policy, under what circumstances will they involve a parent. When I transition an autistic student to college, we have this conversation together. And I will tell that student, if I know that something's going on with you, do I have your permission to involve your parents? If I feel that I need the parent in my corner to help me help a student, then we have that conversation and sign, releases. They're not FERPA waivers. They're just the students agreeing that I can share a certain amount of information with their parent if I need to. And then we talk about what would be the circumstances in which I might need to.
Mm. I think that's actually an interesting segue too, when we're talking about, readiness and parent expectations. And also, so this same parent has asked a question about where their student can get training in executive functioning skills because they think that their student who's going away in the fall doesn't have sufficient ones. And so it's a great segue into support programs, Amy. So one of the things to think about is there are on-campus support programs, and there are a lot of people offering off-campus support programs. Now, the ones on campus sometimes are specific to autism. So why don't we start first of all with those and how I mean, for those whose kid is going to school in the fall, your student has already committed, although they can still take a year and defer. If you've not heard that expression before, they can defer for a year if you're really, really worried, or a semester. They hold their place, but they don't start if you're pretty sure that they just don't have the skills. Um, and, if they're going to a school that already has um, what do you call it? An outside program, it may be the time, I'm sorry, an on-campus program. Often they can't apply to those in some cases until they've already been enrolled. So this is the time to find that out. So I'm sorry. Please go ahead, Amy.
Yeah, so there's so many different types of programs on campuses, and they're housed in different places as well. And so it can be overwhelming for parents to navigate that, or families to navigate that in pursuit of the right school. A lot of times you get to a school and you're like, we need this support. Where is it? And then identify the program. So it's important to do your research early, kind of starting that junior year, because if you're kind of looking at a specialized program, a lot if them have application processes that really start early into the fall because they have to interview for potential spots. And like you said, there's programs that serve autistic students. There's programs that serve kind of the broader neurodivergent students. There's programs that require documentation. There's other programs that don't require a diagnosis and documentation. It really is kind of just finding a good fit for your student at a campus and then kind of accessing and looking at the resources. I had so many families that would kind of come across the country to go to a school that had a support program. And that works for some folks, but you can also identify, we do coaching through College Autism Spectrum and help families kind of navigate that executive functioning piece as the transition begins. And so
I'm going to
we have a,
drop that link here
yeah,
too in the
please.
chat, and then on YouTube for folks. These women are the team behind collegeautismspectrum.com, and they provide all sorts of services. So check them out. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
but you said it was about like how do you coach the coachability of executive functioning and where do you find those supports? It changes so drastically in the transition as well. And so kind of being mindful of some of that coming in, but I'll say as a student myself, I found out what my gaps and impacts were kind of navigating the space of college and the differences. And so leaning into student success and the individual programs. I'm sure you guys have stuff to add, but we could do a whole hour talking about program design and what to consider and what to look for. There's a few resources in the book, but also on our website.
Well, maybe we should do that in the fall.
Oh, yeah, that's a good idea. I was going to add that we very purposely did not address specific programs in the book
That's smart,
because
yeah.
things change so drastically year to year, semester to semester. If a director leaves or if the staff is new, we really felt it needed to be a live document. So we do have, and probably one of the most visited pages on our website is the college programs space.
I'll drop that in the chat.
Amy and I believe one other colleague that was working with Amy just updated that whole piece. So if you're looking for specifics, please go to the website. I just also wanted to mention Amy added a wonderful piece to this edition of the book with after each chapter putting in tips for parents. So a lot of what we're talking about today is broken down by chapter in the book. And at the end of each chapter are specific tips of what you might want to be doing at certain times. And I think that can be really helpful for folks who are listening.
Absolutely.
The only thing that I would add to that and is that not every student requires a program.
Right.
So most schools have, learning support offices, not disability services, that serve all students, and they usually do a really good job at coaching some aspects of executive functioning. Almost all of them will have workshops or individual tutoring on time management, breaking an assignment down, writing coaches. So certainly explore those. You may have chosen a university that doesn't have a program, or a youngster might not be interested in a formal autism program. So, definitely look at what is available on the campus.
And this follow-up, I'm hoping a boot camp on executive functioning exists. They're out there. I don't have any specific ones to recommend, but if you do a search, a lot of folks are doing stuff online. My friend Joan Casey, who runs Educational Advocates in Brookline, I think somebody in her practice, so to speak, does something. So they're out there, and you don't have to be close by to have that happen.
The one I will mention, Elizabeth, just
Yeah.
a resource. And again, we're Lori and I are from New England, Massachusetts, and Connecticut, and Elizabeth's in Jersey, and Amy's in Tennessee. So it's also very regional. But there is a camp in New Hampshire that many of you may be familiar with. It's called Akeela, Akeela, and it's specifically for neurodivergent individuals. And they do a program in the summer called Beyond Aquila that is executive function and college prep. So that does, it's sort of, and I've heard a lot of students enjoyed it because it's sort of a camp atmosphere and the learning. But it also gives you a chance to see what being away is like. And for a lot of our students, I'd say the majority of students that I work with right now are going to school while living at home. That's just happens to be the group I'm working with right now. But I do work with a lot of community colleges, and they often have
Right.
fabulous services for our students, for neurodivergent
And
students.
And not just for students with autism, for students with learning disabilities, ADHD. If you are concerned about their ability to handle themselves, this is a great, ramp up to fully independent living away from college. It allows you to kind of keep an eye on things without it, and also without it costing, tens of thousands of dollars to see how that goes. So that's something to think about. And we are, let's see, just see.
I would say too, it's a great question to ask as you explore like what campus is right for you, for students to
Right.
explore like what campus is right for them. So whether it be in the disabilities office or student success, like ask those questions. What kind of executive
Mhm.
functioning support does the campus offer? And that's for those students who might not be desiring a specific program.
Right. And sometimes they'd rather go to the peer tutoring. And again, remember that peer tutoring is often subject specific, although they may have academic coaches or whatever they call, upper class students who are good at this stuff. And so the support may not be through the disability services office. And actually that can be a selling point, but you just have to have the expectation that these folks, and even sometimes in a specialized program or in disability services, don't have the kind of background perhaps parents would expect
Mhm.
for this stuff. So you do need to have realistic expectations about what colleges don't and do and don't offer. This isn't, public K-12 where you must be certified in a certain area to be working with students.
If I can address that for a minute, Elizabeth.
Yeah,
I'm
please,
sorry,
Jane.
did I interrupt you? I'm
Not,
sorry.
nope, I was all done.
Um, I think that what you're saying is crucial to our conversation today.
Okay.
I don't think certainly, and I was a higher ed professional for decades before I
Mm-hmm.
had anybody in special education of my own family. I really did not understand the expertise that the special educators have that we don't, that just doesn't exist at college.
Mm-hmm.
And so I always encourage families to make sure that their students are really getting a lot of that background before getting out of high school. It's those special educators that can teach some of the executive function. I know that the person who asked the question, their student probably didn't get that background, but learning how to read a chapter of a textbook, learning how to make your own study guides. Students are not going to get study guides at college. That doesn't
Mm-mm.
happen.
Mm-mm.
And it's those special ed teachers that can really assist your students in how to break down an assignment, how to read a chapter, how to pull out the important information and make your own study guide. And too often we see students who have had special ed since kindergarten, but they didn't get some of that instruction because everybody was
Yeah.
too busy
Yeah.
trying to take AP physics and not do how
Yeah.
to read a textbook chapter and how
Yeah.
to, because they would no, but they'll get their AP study guide. That's the stuff that they're going to need to know how to do when they get to college. So please use those experts in K-12 and let them teach your kids what we all know they really need moving forward.
Yeah. So ladies, rounding the bend here. First of all, before I forget to do this, how can folks get in touch with you? Because I do see some questions we won't have time to get to, and some other things that maybe are more individual questions. What's the best way for folks to reach you?
You can email us at info@collegeautismspectrum.com, and then we'll kind of send them to whoever. And so if you have a specific question for one of us, just address it in that email, and then I'll forward it on to
Okay.
folks.
And the same if they want to email you, Elizabeth, you can forward it to Elizabeth has all of our emails, and we can certainly get the information that way too. And we're happy to help.
Yeah, silly. They're silly enough to share their emails with me. So let's wrap up. I know that I once got a comment after one of my own podcast appearances and it stuck with me, and I mean that in a good way. A parent said, "Well, gee whiz, Elizabeth, thanks for all the depressing stuff. Isn't there any good news?" So we'd love to ask the three of you each, and we'll start with Amy just because I can see her on my screen that way. What's something you'd like for parents to take away that's really positive?
I don't know, there's so much. Like I know we talk about, oh, expect or consider this, but there's so much growth that happens for any student that transitions into college or kind
Mhm.
of after high school in general, being patient with that and celebrating the wins, because the wins are pretty cool to watch. Having done the work for 17 years and watching several students succeed and several students have kind of setbacks but then come back and finish, it's really rewarding to see kind of that end product. And so, yeah, just hold on to that hope that exists and celebrate the wins along the way.
Jane?
Go ahead, Laura. You were about to.
Well, I was going to say, and we were asked this question in a webinar that we did yesterday. We hear a lot of negative things and read a lot of negative things, in the past month or so, and about an epidemic and exploding numbers of students with autism. But if you flip that, what that's meant is because of the presence of an increased number of students with autism in high school and in college, colleges are ready in ways that we weren't before. There are
Mm.
programs, there are faculty members, people identify as neurodivergent, so there are mentors on campuses. It really is, a perfect time to send a youngster off to a campus because we've got our acts together now in a way that when Jane and I started this work, 25 plus years ago, was not the case. So, I think that that's very positive, and we expect that to continue. And Amy can talk about the growth in the number of programs that support students with autism, but even in regular campuses, it is rare to find a campus that isn't deeply experienced working on some level with autistic kids. And those kids are graduating. They're going to graduate and professional school. My own son is in a master's program. It is achievable. And so we want to keep that momentum and keep that idea that what we know about autism is growing by leaps and bounds, and the way in which we support students in college is growing as well.
And I will say the most important thing is believe in your kid, because for
Yeah.
everything that you're saying, seeing, and everything that you're concerned about, they also have grown up with you and your family and all the good things that you've brought to those individuals. And believe in that in your kid, because part of it is just adolescence or young adulthood, and students are sort of finding their way. And our neurodivergent students may have some more challenges, but they also have a different kind of persistence. And so, I mean, all of us on the screen today have just seen amazing students, and we've seen amazing parents, and you're all doing a really good job. Make sure you as parents get support. All of us on the screen are friends, and we have each other to support us within our challenges and celebrations with our families. Make sure you have that support, because you will, we walk in a little different moccasins than maybe all of our neighbors. And it's important to find some other people who shop at the same moccasin store you do.
Love that.
It's
Yeah.
really important. So make
Yeah.
sure you've got that support, because if you're stressed, your kid is feeling that, whether you think you're showing it or not. And if you're worried about it, they're going to worry about it. So I think the best thing we can say is enjoy this. If you're even thinking about high school graduation and college, congratulations. That's amazing. That is not something that someone of a parent of a student with autism 20, 25 years ago really would have been in a conversation about. So we've come so far, and we have to support each other to go even further so that we can support our family members. And before we run out of time, Elizabeth, thank you for having us.
Oh,
We so appreciate the opportunity to do these kinds of things that, we try so hard to have an opportunity to speak to parents. And sometimes we
mhm.
can get small groups, and we all know how hard it is to get out of our houses. And sometimes we
Oh
just
my goodness.
don't get to talk to the parents while we're talking more to professionals. So thank you for this opportunity.
Well, I mean, it is one of the joys in my life that I have, colleagues like you who are also my friends. So, we're all out there just trying to get the information families need to those families. So wherever you are watching this, um, Facebook will only keep it up for 30 days. That's their new thing, but it will be on YouTube where anybody can watch it. It's all for free. Read the book one more time, Neurodiversity in College, Parent's Guide for Autistic Students. Connect with the College Autism Spectrum team and, sign up to follow them on Facebook if you're on here to see what their next events are. But I hope you folks found this helpful. Reach out to these ladies and everybody enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Have a good one.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks.